Welcome, folks. Very good evening to all of you. Great to sit with you all, folks, discuss interesting stuff. And today we have Nimit with us, who's gonna take us through complete bare essentials of A/B testing, from where to start, what to do, why to do, and how we can actually crack important problems, key problems, by validating those ideas using A/B testing, right? So Nimit is going to be walking us through a lot of these points today, interesting revelations that we'll have. I'm going to be your host for the evening. I am Harshad. I take care of the developer platform and go to market at Truecaller. I primarily work with a lot of product and tech teams to help them drive growth with their users on mobile via different offerings that Truecaller has for the community. Right. Very quick view on how we are going to proceed. All of you folks are currently live on our streaming link. Nimit is going to be taking us through the session. And while you are on the streaming link, the session is being recorded. So wherever you have any questions, feel free to ask us to them. Nimit will try to cover all of those. To ask questions, you could visit Slido very easily and just type in the event code as build for mobile. And as soon as you do that, you will be joined into an event. You'll be seeing a feed and just post the questions there. So Smriti and I from my team will be looking into those questions and will be moderating those along with Nimit and ensure that your doubts and queries are being resolved. You can also do it if you're on Twitter. Just tweet us through Twitter devs using the same hashtag so that we understand that you have these questions regarding the session. So whichever is comfortable for you folks, feel free to do that. So yeah, again repeating, just go to Slido, put the event code build for mobile, join the event, post your questions, or simply tweet us at Twitter devs. So yeah, I'm as said, right? I'm pretty sure a lot of you must have used Truecaller in your daily lives, right? And been there, for the last 10 years, helping users to achieve a lot of things. Our core mission, our primary goal, has been to build trust by making communication safe and efficient, right? Today we help millions of users to understand who's calling them, who is bothering them. Is it some fraud? Is it some spam? Or whatever is it, and help them to take the right decision on picking the call. That could be a big opportunity for them, right? And we've been building this over years. Today we have more than 250 million users globally across markets like India, Middle East, South Asia, Africa, and more. And primarily India being our biggest market, where we have more than 175 million active users. And as said, I'm sure you must have used Truecaller somewhere in your mobile life, and which is where a fun fact I would love to share. We blog. I'll also not call out the number. It's a too big number to call, so feel free to read and interpret. But yeah, last year we actually, this were the number of spam calls which were identified and blocked by Truecaller, which is something equivalent to watching all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones 2.3 million times, right? That is the impact that we are making in the real world out there. And as more and more users come online, for whom number is going to be the identifier, and they are going to be tied with that identifier, our responsibility towards making it much more easy, simpler, and safe for users even increases, right? And as we discuss, right, as we move on, we all today are living in a mobile-first world, right? Predominantly, when we talk to a lot of products in the ecosystem who are engaging users, onboarding users, one increasing feedback that we've seen is, apart from we all focusing on trying to build an app-first world, the mobile web scenarios also increase, and typically of the web speed as well, we see 70-80% of the users actually coming on mobile, right? And I think that is the phenomena that we all realize and we all are waiting for. Being fortunate that Truecaller has been an app-first or mobile-first model since our day one. And we've got a lot of learnings, a lot of thoughts while we built it, from the product aspects, from engineering aspects, and which over the series of Build for Mobile will keep on bringing it to you, right? As a part of the same story, the developer platform team at Truecaller has been enabling a frictionless mobile identity for leading mobile-first products in the ecosystem. Today, more than 600, 700 mobile-first products use us in a completely easy manner, to escape any OTPs or frictionlessly onboard these users and along tap their verified trusted identity, right? And as a part of those discussions, we usually frequently get to hear on a lot of things that, hey, how do we do this? How do we execute this? What do your teams or does someone in the peer network do X Y Z? And as a part of those feedbacks, right, I would like to bring Nimit on board as one of the first online sessions. That, hey, we often get to hear that teams want to run a lot of experiments. They want to try out. They want to qualitatively and quantitatively quantify what they're building is right or wrong. What could be the better way of doing it, so that they could optimize on their different processes internally and ensure success for their users, right? And yeah, I think that's all about this. I will have Nimit to take over now and proceed from here. Nimit, you go ahead with sharing your screen.
Sure. Yeah. 1 second.
Yes, I will just.
Awesome. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Super. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for joining in. I think it means a lot for you to join on a weekday, especially. And thank you, Harshad and team, for inviting me on. Before we go ahead, I just a quick note. The reason me and Harshad got to know each other is because you're exploring Truecaller for BigBasket, and I just want to put out a small note, unsolicited, obviously, that we really love Truecaller, and just to give you a perspective, we kind of saw a sign-up rates increase by a decent 10%, and got pretty good adoption with our base. As you can see, more than 50%, and the effort was pretty small. So we really love Truecaller, and I think anyone who's building for, I would say, the next billion, in one way, should definitely consider Truecaller. I think building an app in India without with the traditional OTP just doesn't make sense anymore. So just a small note there. Okay, awesome. We will dive into the presentation. Just a quick bit about me. Is my video streaming as well?
Yes. So video, yeah, I think we are able to see you.
Awesome. So I'll continue then.
Sure.
Awesome. So just a quick bit about me. Currently, I'm leading growth, product management, BigBasket. I was the first growth hire. I think a year back, when I was asked to come in and start the whole, I would say, product vertical to help with product growth. I was one of the first thing I did was build a rapid A/B testing system, so that we can actually have more confidence in what we're building. Before that, we were basically just shipping what we're building to everything, all the users, or at least one city, and then just crossing our fingers and hoping it works. If things don't work, we'll just roll everything back. So that was kind of really hampering our innovativeness, hampering our confidence in what we are doing. So that was one of the first things. Before BigBasket, I was at Zoomcar, and there I was helping them rethink their digital product for multimodal mobility. As you might know, Zoomcar has been trying to go beyond cars into two-wheelers. So two-wheelers and also three-wheelers down the line. So they wanted to kind of rethink the whole app, much like you can say Ola in some way. So that's then. Before that, I was 1 second. I think, yeah. Sorry. Before that, I was doing my own startup in Bangalore. It was called Cushy. The idea of the product was about helping people with hyperlocal product-based discovery, and our twist was that we create theme-based communities, Reddit-like communities, where people could post pictures and talk about the place. And what we did was we built a patented system to extract the geotag from the pictures and validate the authenticity, as well as create a map in real time. So think of like creating Google Maps from people's pictures, Instagram-like pictures and notes, instead of getting people to pin a place like they do on Google Maps. So we were trying a different approach to kind of fill up the long tail of Google Maps through this digital product. It went well, I think, for some time, and then we kind of couldn't really crack the business equation, and we had to kind of close it down. Before that, I was at IT Roorkee, did my bachelor engineering, and got out in 2014. Here are my links. You can connect with me on any platform. Awesome. So let's get into one more thing. I just, for people who are interested in broader topics, I used the lockdown to also ship one of my very long pending projects, which is a book on personalization. So it's on Amazon. You can go grab it. It's a step-by-step guide to help you go from understanding what is personalization to going all the way till how to actually apply it to any product that you're working on, right, with frameworks and examples and everything. So not just for tech people. Here a bunch of reviews from people who kind of saw the early versions. Yeah, shameless plug here. You can tap the link later when you get the presentation to read a sample and go ahead. Cool, awesome. So yeah, I thought before we talk in general sense and before we talk about what is A/B testing and all, let's talk about um, uh, common myth. But before we go into that, this is also something I had in my. I believed in this myth before I started understanding A/B testing a year back. So it's not natural for you to have this. So here's the thing. So generally, when people talk about A/B testing, offline, online, they talk about testing UI optimizations, like how testing a different color of the button, testing a different UI style, things like that, right? That's kind of the scope people have when thinking of A/B testing. But actually, what A/B testing is it's about validating any product idea. I think this is the biggest myth in my understanding, that people need to kind of bust and understand that, hey, any product idea that you have, that actually fits under the gamut of A/B testing. So in other way, you should we should instead of A/B testing, I think the better term is A/B experimentation, and which I think would help you understand better. So cool.
Right.
So I'll go further on this. So here's a small, I really like quoting this person. This is directly from Spotify. And in one of the interviews, he mentioned very succinctly that A/B testing has a reputation of purely being a tool for optimizing website details, which is basically font style and color of the button, which is great. I think if you're at ultra high scale, those kind of things really add up and make sense. But you have to also understand that it's fundamentally a tool to confront ideas with reality and check if they do what you thought they would, right? So basically, we're talking about any new feature, any new shortcut in the app that you build, pretty much any product change that one is thinking of, that technically falls under the ambit of A/B testing. So that's the broader shift in thinking that I hope you go back with after the presentation as well. And cool, awesome. So before we jump in further, let me just put across a simple definition so that we're all on the same page. This definition, by the way, I put together based on my own learnings over the years and try to see that it covers every aspect of A/B testing, which we generally miss out on. So what is A/B testing? It's basically a scientific way to measure the actual impact of any product change by showing the change only to a small set of randomly selected users and comparing their behavior with users who weren't shown the product change. As simple as that, right? Key things to note here is scientific. It is not just when I saw a bunch of questions for the event, which are people asking about how do you design an A/B test, how do you roll out A/B test. I think in all this process, one thing you have to keep in mind is you are actually a scientist, right? So you have to think like a scientist. Think of a hypothesis, think of control, think of environment where you can experiment with, think of measuring the metrics the way a scientist would do for any science experiment. So that's why the emphasis on scientific. So I hope this gives you a good landing to think of A/B testing. Now, going forward, here's a small infographic to kind of give you the sense. So entire population that you see here is basically your all app users, right? And what A/B testing does is it helps you create a small bubble. For example, the first bubble that you see, experimental group and control group. This is basically an experiment A/B test, right? Where there are two independent groups. Control group are the people of the population who are not seeing the product change, and experimental group are basically your users who are seeing the experiment, whatever it is, right? Similarly for experiment number 2 and experiment number 3. That's in a nutshell what A/B testing is. Taking a small group randomly, giving them the product change and comparing their metrics, their behaviors with the people in the control group. Simple as that. Now, a small twist on that is that it's not necessary that you only test one product change, right? For example, let's think of some very common is onboarding flow, right? Let's say you're experimenting with that. So chances are you might have multiple ideas to test, right? Like you can, let's say if there is 4-step onboarding flow, you might want the first variant, you might want to test, okay, 1, 2, 3. Step number 1, 2, 3, and the other way you're thinking, okay, maybe if I put this step first, it might lead to more conversions, net conversion. So you might go with 3, 2. That's it. And then the third variant could be just step number 1. who knows? So just to clarify, this A/B testing also takes care of that. So we call it, technically we call it multivariate test, and the idea is that you basically create multiple experiment groups, as you can see here, right? Just one small note here as well, that the variation that you're talking about could be any variation. So I just put some examples here. Like type and variation is basically a simple UI or UX variation, the one we talked about right now. Second could be no change in UI UX, just maybe a content change. For example, you are this is an experiment I did recently. I'll show you in a bit, wherein we change the name of a feature to different ways. So in variant experimental group A, we call the feature something else. In experimental group B, we call it something else, and C something else. And then we measured their impact in parallel, and we saw that the second variant of the feature name that worked the best. So we finally decided to go with that. So that's, and the type 3 variation is a mixture of design as well as content and copy. So just to give you a broader idea on that. Now, one other thing I want to talk about is A/B testing slash A/B experimentation is actually happening all around you. It's not actually rocket science. So if you look at, like, this example is from Twitter, and I noticed that they were testing this new feature where they allow you to control the privacy settings. So as you can see, they kind of told me that, okay, we are testing new settings, and starting today you can see compose a tweet. So I was probably one of the few people who was seeing this feature, and they were comparing my metrics with people who are not seeing the feature and trying to see if it's worthwhile to launch it globally. So this is from Twitter. Then here's a small example from Instagram, where again, as you can see, they were testing a small change. This is a pretty radical example where they were trying to see if they don't show the likes to your followers, right? And they were I don't think they went forward with it, but it's a pretty cool example of A/B testing at scale. As you can see, this is also a clear example of testing an idea, right? They're not testing a button color, they're not testing a layout, they're testing a thought, which is, hey, what if we don't show the likes to follower? Does it change the engagement? Does it have any negative impact? XYZ, right? The last example I have here from Pinterest. I think early this year they started. They wanted to try that idea of creating Pinterest-like stories within Pinterest. Sorry, Instagram-like stories within Pinterest, where people who are pinning, they could also create multiple steps and express their pin in a much better manner. So this also was in early access mode. Chances are they were trying to, not chance, I think, I'm pretty sure they're trying to compare engagement with people who are seeing this with people who are not gotten access to it yet, and see if it's should they decide if they have to make some changes before they launch the idea globally, or put it back in the refrigerator. So cool. Awesome. So I hope by now we've got a clean fundamental idea of what A/B testing is. Now, this is something I like to talk about before we talk about, okay, how do we do A/B testing? How do we, what are the steps to create a test? Is just to get an idea about what people do generally. I don't know if this happens in your organization, but I just want to put out things that I've observed across my experience. So one of the common things is, executives saying, hey, I mean, these are organizations who are not pro A/B testing or experimentation in general. They're like, okay, are you really sure about trying this super risky idea? Because, it could make or break the complete product overnight, right? So that's one. Second is, are we not confident enough to ship this new idea to all users in one go, right? Pretty interesting, skepticism, sorry. And the last one is, if a KPIs don't improve after launching the idea, it's just not a good idea, period, right? This last one is I think is really special because business leaders and some product leaders, I felt that they miss out on the idea, that concept that, hey, every metric is driven by a lot of internal factors as well as external factors, right? A simple example could be a festive season in India, right? I remember back in Zoomcar, even with BigBasket, whenever there was a festive season or there's this sale going on, the KPIs used to really go up, and after obviously, and a couple of weeks after that, the KPIs used to just crash down. And if you would have launched a feature during, let's say, Diwali or those kind of periods, I think you would be happy, right? Because your KPIs would improve naturally. But the point is, that is not because your feature worked great. It was just because people are more intent to use the product during that time period, right? Similarly, if when there's a lean period during let's say the summer vacation period, the last couple of months, when people are not really buying as much as, or because people have gone back home because of lockdowns, KPIs go down, and again, this that tends to make people feel that okay, my product idea is not great, right? If you're not doing an A/B test, scientific A/B test, that's the risk. Now, yeah, one more thing is like simple side that hey, we don't have enough engineering bandwidth to build and run experiments. I guess this was also one of the most common question I saw building up to the event. And as you'll see, it's actually the way I would put it is if you have enough engineering bandwidth and savviness to build a digital product, whatever it is, right? Um, um, you have enough to do an A/B. You have enough to adopt A/B testing, right? It's really not that complex. Cool. Now, yes. So, given what, I mean, as we talk about this, what organizations do now, the impact of that is this. At the quarter end, you have little clarity on which ideas helped really improve the APIs or which did not, right? Because as business leaders, uh, uh, like to think, they think in terms of quarters. Okay, in this quarter, I have to move this certain KPI from X to Y, but in that quarter, let's say there were 15 ideas which were launched, right? Now, out of 15 ideas, 10 would have been great, have an actual impact. 5 might have, not have it, have either not have an impact or had a negative impact. But the problem is, the business and the product team is looking at a blended metric, the final metric. So they have no idea which ideas to pursue for the next quarter, or which ideas or which line of thinking is not really working out and punt on it, right? So that's one of the biggest, I think, negative disadvantage of that. Then when things go horribly wrong, let's say you launch a feature on a Saturday, on a Sunday, and then Monday you come in and see, okay, all the KPIs are tanking. It's a conversion, new mission conversion tanks. Now, the general reaction, knee-jerk reaction of the organization, hey, let's just revert whatever we have done over the weekend, right? Just randomly do that. Without any understanding about, okay, why is it actually happening? Now, problem is they can't, because they don't know if the impact is because a certain feature, newly launched feature was the problem, or it was, let's say hypothetically, some external environmental factor, external factor, let's say a competitor running very insane deals, or it was a technical issue, right? People were trying to check out, but they can't because the server went down, right? So if you had a controlled A/B test running, you could say like even the new user conversion tanking down, but if the A/B test you see that, okay, because of your feature, if you compare the metrics of people who saw your feature, which are people in the experimental group, and compare them to the people in the control group, there's no difference between them, or very little difference. You can say, I'm not to blame, right? You're absolutely in a safe patch there. So that's one. It helps you, basically, bottom line, it helps you really pinpoint the right problem in the system, and not just blindly roll back everything that you have done as the product change. And lastly, yeah, the obvious strategic one, that because there's no way to test high risk ideas, the organization naturally tries to not think of high risk and high reward ideas, right? Because it's very simple, right? And especially when you're at scale, any small idea, any small change in the funnel could have a very high absolute revenue impact, or absolute user impact into the perception. So CXOs are really risk averse. If there's no way to test any blue ocean idea, even they believe in it, if you cannot test on a small base, they would be really not so keen to try it out. And overall, it will stop the product from growing tremendously well. And this is, by the way, something I noticed at BigBasket. So there's a bunch of very high risk things that we tried because we had A/B testing, but before that, even though those ideas was floating around in the organization and people knew that the product is broken, the fact that we could not test any new hypothesis on a small group stopped them from trying, even thinking about it, for the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years that they've been around, right? And the moment we could test them and through a controlled A/B test with minimal risk, right? Because this, let's say 50,000 users, we were able to figure out, okay, whether it's helpful or not, or whether we should change it. That led us to ship, I would say, 3 major late funnel ideas, which had tremendous impact. So that's, I would say, how adopting A/B test changes the equation in the organization. Now, yeah, just a quick, I would say, recap there. if you have A/B testing in place in organization and as part of your regular product management flow, number one, yes, it helps you know the exact KPI impact of any product change. Be it even a small renaming of a feature, you will know exactly there was, let's say, a 0.3%, a 0.03% uplift or not because of that. Generally, what happens is, in general, if you don't have this, you just ship it and have a release on it and be happy. Yeah, I just shipped it, but you cannot put a figure on it because you don't know how did it impact the final aggregated metric the organization is seeing. So I think if you ask me, I think that in itself is a reason to use the system, that you can at least at the end of the quarter say, okay, I've shipped 5 different ideas and each idea had this exact impact on the final KPI, right? So that's that. If things go wrong, like I said, you know exactly what, let's say you ship three changes over the last 1 week, and suddenly the next week or so you see some things going off, or after the month you see the overall retention is going bad. You can go back and see, okay, which experiment, which user had this kind of negative impact on the methods, and zero down on what might have been bad. And if so, you can quickly turn it off as well, right? As simple as, you don't have to do any rollback, nothing, just turn off the experiment and then think of a better way to do it down the line. Lastly, yes, the last thing I said in the last slide, which is you and the organization gets comfortable trying high risk ideas with minimal to no risk. So, and that opens up you to a lot of possibilities which you probably wouldn't have even thought of before. So that's that. And lastly, on the rocket science argument, like I said, if your team has built a product which has, I think this is an even better way of putting it. I just missed about that. If your team has built a product which just has a code base of any complexity, you have enough to run A/B tests. Little of that. We'll talk about, I saw a bunch of questions around the tools that we could use for A/B testing. I'll talk about them in a bit. But yes, that's the bottom line. And given my experience from scratch with A/B testing over the last 1 year. Cool. Right. To give you a perspective on how I shouldn't say easy, I say straightforward it is to get started with the A/B testing. Here's what I achieved with 1 month of integration with the tool. This tool is called Optimize. It's a very popular US-based organization who solely focus on A/B testing. Before I go forward, just quick note: this is not a paid endorsement. Optimize. It's just that we're using them. I really love the product. But yes, there are tons of products out there. You can go and do your own due diligence and figure out what's the best fit for you. For the context of the presentation, we'll be using them to give you an idea. So, but yeah, this is just, don't go by the exact name. You can just take away your understanding from this tool. So yeah, so basically after 1 month of integration effort, this experiment we had was, we had this very 90s looking address form where every new visitor had to use this to fill up his home address. And what we knew, I would say all this while, is, hey, this is really not great, because it takes a lot of effort, it's visually really heavy, and we had around, I'd say, 40% new user dropping off on this page, right? And we like, we can do it better, right? And then the obvious answer was, hey, let's use GPA, let's use maps as the way other products are using, right? Swiggy, Zomato, you name it, and it's just made sense. The problem was, before we had A/B experimentation capability, we just could not take the risk, because if you launch this new design, and if it doesn't work out, number one, how would you know if it doesn't work out, right? Because you don't know who saw it, who did not saw it. It's just launching to everyone. And if it didn't work out, then you will have to just only way you have to turn it off, and then think whether or how should make it better, right? So because of A/B testing, we launched this. As you can see, this is not the final design, but this is like early version of the design. We launched this, and we initially saw. Sorry, I hazed out the proprietary metrics, conversion metrics. But as if you can focus here, the complete funnel metric here, we saw a 43% improvement in conversion, new visitor conversion, because of this one small change. Small change in the whole picture of things. But unfortunate thing was, we also saw that the errors increased by 31%. By error, I mean people who got stuck here and kind of bounced off, right? So we were like, okay, this is great, but how can we reduce the errors? Because if we reduce this, hopefully our conversion 43.17 could go further up, right? Because those people bouncing off could go further. So what we did was, we launched a new version of the experiment. We looked at the data of basically we went at the experiment and compared the data between users of these two cohorts and figured out what was the difference in the behavior, figured out what they might be stuck on, and did some user research, and we found they found some glaring issues in design, and some design as well as some issues on the front end error handling and some server side responses. Once we did the diagnosis, made a next version of the experiment and relaunched again. Then, as you can see here on the right, after relaunching again as an AB experiment, controlled AB experiment, we saw a 70% uplift in conversion, right? And surprise and Eureka, we had a minus 36% drop. I mean, 36% drop in errors, right? So this, I think, in my perspective, is a great example of how you can use this controlled release approach to really get to the right product, right? As you can see, we went from a very crappy kind of a design to a design which first helped us understand and then finally got to the most optimal design for us, which is giving us tremendous impact in conversion, all because we had A/B testing in place. So cool. Yeah, this is one more example. This is a recent example I ran like last week. I thought of just adding the last minute. Here, this is an example of a multivariate A/B test. As you can see, what we did was so there's a feature called Smart Basket, which is a personalized shopping recommendation system that we have for people who have shot with us quite a while. And what we do is, what the experiment was about adding some shortcuts to Smart Basket, across I cannot talk about the exact shortcut because the experiment is still in progress. But what we did was we wanted to change the name Smart Basket in different ways. For example, the first one we tried, I think, My List, and second one we tried your shopping list, and third one we kept it as Smart Basket. So those were the variations that we did, simple, the copy variations we did, and we tested all three of them parallelly, and to figure out, okay, the entry point works. Let's just figure out what is the best terminology that especially the new visitors understand. And as you can see, the second variant C, seems to have had the most impact. As you can see, 95% improvement in people coming to Smart Basket. So there you go. That's another example of how we are leveraging A/B testing in BigBasket. This is again example of content. The one of previous one was example of a UX-based A/B test. Cool. And one more question here related to A/B test before we dive into designing an A/B test, steps to design A/B test, which is when not to A/B test feature. One is very simple, when you don't have enough users, right? And the simple framework that I like to tell people is, if you are pre-product market fit, right? If you're pre-product market fit, you're essentially trying to figure out a product that works, right? You're still, essentially the entire business is an experiment in a very lame manner. So you're trying to figure out how to get to the right design of your business so that you can get traction without you having to pump in money, right? So if you are in that phase, I would not suggest A/B testing. But the moment you've crossed over to the other side of the picture, which is post-product market fit, for example, BigBasket is at post-product market fit. We have cracked the business. We're growing organically. We don't have to worry about. We do invest in acquisition, but acquisition is not paid acquisition. Rather, paid acquisition is not necessary for survival of the business, growth of the business. So that's one. The second one is when it's strategically or technically not feasible to show the change only to a randomly picked set of users. Example of that is like product rebranding. I don't know how many of you noticed this Airbnb rebranding, I think a bunch of years back. So as an example, if you're rebranding, it's like a very public thing. You do a lot of PR releases. Things like those, I doubt they can be A/B tested. But yes, if someone can, great. But in my sense, this is a good example of things that are slightly tough to do A/B testing on from a strategical point of view. Now, from a technical point of view, I would have things like full product design revamp. For example, I think Slack is a good example. They did a full revamp recently, and the way they tested was they pushed out the new design through their beta channel, and they tested the metrics there. And then once we're comfortable, I saw on the blog that that's when they start rolling it out across the regular user base. Or last one, I think, yeah, pretty obvious for people who are in the startup phase, is that when you're limited business runway. So if you have let's say a lot of users, but you don't have a lot of time to kind of crack the business and get revenue floating, then you should just go gangbusters, roll out the chain, see if it's really changing the metric big time, and then take the call from that point of view. Other reason is yeah, I think, yeah, that's it. That's fine. I think we covered the first one. Okay, awesome. Now here comes the question that if you can, in these scenario that we just discussed, if you cannot do the A/B test, then what is that you could do? Should we just like roll the idea to all users, right away? Again, which is almost always a risky approach, right? You don't want to be woken up at 12 in the night saying, hey, your recent feature launch crashed these metric or crashed the product and we have to roll it back. So here what I recommend is, when you cannot A/B test, go for feature flags. Feature flag is nothing but a simple toggle button at any kind of degree. So one simple example is, for example, you have a configuration. As you can see, this is an infographic to explain that these are different kind of audiences for a product, and these are the different like toggle buttons that you can toggle on and off from a dashboard, and control who gets to see the product. If it's stable, there's no complaints, there's metrics are all right, then you can go ahead and switch on the next one, and so on until you have all the users using this new feature that you have built. A simple example could be, let's say my first button here is corresponding to launch only for people who have opted in to try the new. Let's say you're running a opt-in form for a bunch of months. Hey, we're trying this new idea, you want to try it out. And let's say first you toggle on the feature flag to show this new feature only to users who are part of that list. Once you see that, okay, these people's general metrics are looking better as expected, there are not any complaints, there are no technical issues, then you can, let's say, switch on the next toggle button, which is let's say all user USA. And then if metrics look good, then you can go for the enable the feature, enable, like let's say hypothetically third norm to enable the feature in Singapore. And then if everything looks good, then you can just toggle on the the global button and say, yeah, I'm ready to roll to all users. This, in a way, this is, so the trade-off that you're doing is you're not getting exact metric impact. So you won't be able to say for confidence, okay, my feature increased let's say engagement by 10%. You probably won't be able to say that because there's no way for you to scientifically compare. Right? Because people who are part of the other group, basically the reason you cannot compare is biased in a way, right? You're picking up people from a certain parameter, and then you're trying to compare with other people. So you can do that, but it won't be super reliable. Now, but what you get is approximate idea of the impact. So, for example, if feature if the feature that you're building is so good that it's doubling conversions, like like the map-based address map experience just showed you, which is an obvious kind of an idea, then you would at least get, like in my dashboard, I could see, okay, there's an uplift by 70%. If I were to do a feature flag rollout, at least I'll see that, okay, people who are seeing the feature, who are part of this cohort, the green cohort, their conversion improved by 40%, something like that. So at least I know that I'm in the right direction. So that is what I would recommend then. Now, okay, so I hope by now you've got a good sense of the basic A/B testing, what it is, how it's done in real life at organization like BigBasket. Now we will jump into the steps to design and launch an A/B test. Okay, so what I've done is I've kind of split this across a simple, I think 5 or 6 steps, and that I think should help you cover the entire workflow. Again, this is going to be suggestive. Feel free to tweak it as per your comfort, as per your workflow. And if you do find a better workflow, please do reach back to me and help me about my workflow. All right. Okay, so yeah, there's the 6 steps. Awesome. So step 1, I think generally what people talk about when you look at any literature online or any YouTube videos about A/B testing basics, the first thing people talk about generally is filling up a document. I'll link a Pinterest video in the end somehow somewhere. And what I felt is instead of starting with a document, filling up a Google Doc for 2 hours, I think it's generally better and it's worked better for me across all my AB experiments is to visualize the experiment, visualize the experience that you're trying to test. So what I'm talking about is storyboarding. I'm sure a bunch of you guys who know what it means, but for others who have not done before, essentially what I'm talking about is creating a simple flow diagram, right? Using actual screenshots, right, or mockups. If it's a new feature, obviously you would have to create mockups from your end. You won't have the final UI. If not, just paste screenshots, and then what this helps you with is understanding the actual flow of the feature. Flow of the experimental feature, and understand that, okay, how will people who not know the experimental feature will see this, right? So as you can see here, this is generally the template I follow, which is first I create the storyboard for people who are the control group. Control group basically people using the current product, okay, exactly how the feature works for them. And then the experimental group, we create a storyboard for how do we want the experimental feature to work exactly in terms of all the logical flows, right? And then we kind of deliberate on that. Okay, this is not optimal. Let's make it even better, until we get to a point that, yeah, we feel that, okay, this flow diagram is the best, right? And we think best in sense of best is it's our best bet, right? And once we get to that, that is when we go into further details, right? What if you go with what I felt is if you start with documentation right away, generally it works like a dampener. And the most interesting downside is you might not even realize, because not every experiment idea is worth trying. Some ideas are just okay, like changing a button color. It sounds good in theory, but may not be so awesome. So when you lay out your the experiment in your mind in such way, you'll also see the nitty-gritties, the intricacies. Maybe there's a technical complexity that will stop you from experimenting, right? So all these things get cleared out really fast before you invest more into the experiment. So think of this like prep phase. Let's see a bunch of ideas on the table. Let's storyboard. Let's see what is what seems like doable as well as impactful, and then go forward with that. Now on the tool side, what I use is Balsamic. I think a bunch of you guys must be using it to create mockups. And I stitch whatever you're seeing is stitched together on this tool called Scalpel. It's a storyboarding tool, and it's perhaps the simplest that I've found till now. It's a Mac app where you can just basically drop anything you want, image, screenshot, anything, and you can create a connection like this and add this text and everything and share it over with anyone. So that's step one. Okay, step two is is listing out the riskiest assumptions. Riskiest assumptions, it's right, I created a small infographic to help you understand better. So every idea is basically composed of assumptions like, okay, let's say our idea is like, let's say COD is a payment option that we should explore, right? Now the assumptions around that is we think, yes, COD is a payment feature that people really want in this age, right? It's just easier for especially people in tier 2 markets to absorb, blah blah blah, right? All these assumptions which are part of the idea, but those are pretty much validated. You don't have to, because proof that COD is a great payment instrument, right? Because it's already been around for a bunch of years, and you don't have to really go about proving this. But what happens is, out of all the assumptions that have around the idea, there's going to be a certain kind of assumption which can make or break the entire idea, which are kind of specific to you as well. For example, uh, basically in this example, COD example, I just put a small instance here. So here, for your business, it could be that the product return rate and fraud will increase, which is obvious, but will increase by manageable percentage, right? Now, for example, in BigBasket, we have product return in single digits, right? Now, if it were in the double digits, hypothetically speaking, then it would have been a big problem for us. Then we would have to reconsider COD altogether, right? But yes, thankfully it's not. So that's a risky assumption, right? Secondly, is the turnaround time for COD order refund would be acceptable to customers. So I'm sure a bunch of you guys might have had this experience. So Amazon, if you return, you probably get refunded in the next 6 hours or 12 hours. Other platforms, maybe you have to hang around for 3 days, 4 days, and they had some payment gateway issues, XYZ. And that ultimately makes people not want to use the COD feature at all, right? Which makes the whole idea of putting COD, worthless. So that's one any idea that you have, put out all the assumptions, but then zone down to the inner circle, which are assumptions which can make or break the entire idea, right? Because the assumptions are proven wrong, but I think you need to, what I felt is you need to focus on assumptions which are really critical for your experimental idea. Awesome. So, and one more thing, there's nothing fancy. The simple way to read, I'll make a simple list, bullet list, assumption number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then uh, also put a statement, okay, if this assumption, for example, in this case, for return rate, if it increases, if it goes beyond 10%, we won't be able to have, we won't be happy with it. So you can also put a note there so that people who are signing off the experiment, they know that, okay, this is assumption, but if after the experiment is rolled out and if we see that this is the case, we know what to do, right? So that's that. The third step here is determining the goal metrics. Right? Goal metrics is, I mean, sounds slightly technical, but the idea is what the goal for the experiment. Now, what are the metrics associated with that goal? That is what we are going to talk about. Now, this has been, to be honest, has been a challenge for me right from start. As in, how do have a consistent, comprehensive structure to find the right metrics? Now, what I finally kind of figured out is uh, this kind of structure where you kind of split the impact metrics in 3 buckets. One is definitive impact, which are basically metrics where you know for sure it's going to be impacted either on a positive way or a negative way, right? Possible impact, where you think you're not sure, but there's a chance that it might get impacted. And the third one is no impact, where it's basically all other organizational metrics. So basically, you don't have to worry about the third kind of bucket. It's all the organizational metric. You have to worry about making sure that you have listed out metrics in the first and the second bucket here. And then within that, split it by metrics which, like we discussed, positive impact, negative impact, and similarly for the second bucket. And one last thing you have to do is you have to further split it down for every metric which is in this last bucket here, right? For example, let's say for the COD example, let's say we're talking about new Mr. conversion, right? So we think, okay, it's going to be definitely positive impact on new Mr. conversion. Then make sure to also label the kind of impact you're expecting. So if you're expecting high impact or medium or low impact. So here the thinking is that, and this has been a debate internally, that generally we expect, okay, let's put a number to the kind of conversion impact you're expecting, right? And the fact of the matter is, it's very tough, very tough to guess how much of a metric impact any idea would have, right? All you have is like a broader sense of how impactful it would be, right? So what I found finally work out is creating this buckets. Like if we think that the impact would be, let's say, again, indicative, impact would be in the 5 to 10% range on whatever metric we're talking about, we call it a high impact, kind of a case. If the impact is going to be 1 to 4%, then call it medium impact. And if it's going to be less than, let's say, 1%, then we call the low impact bucket. So that kind of helps us in kind of comfortably labeling the metrics while we are designing the experiment. One small note here: this exercise I think is very important because doing it early on, because it also helps you understand if the experiment is worth pursuing, right? So a small example is, if you don't see any a lot of high impact metrics here on the positive impact bucket, either here or here, then it probably means that, hey, this idea could be reprioritized. You should look for ideas. In my sense, you should always look for ideas which have at least 1 or 2 high impact metrics, either in a definitive or possible impact bucket. So that's about this step. The fourth step here is figuring out the kind of users that we should, because I think this is one of the most common questions people have in general, and even the question that we received. And it is a complex topic, to be honest. It's the simpler approach is just blindly open up to all users and just see if there's impact. Now the thing is, yes, you can do that, but the point is, what might have, there's a couple of possibilities. If you roll out to all kind of users without any consideration to the type of target audience, and let's say you don't see any metric impact, and then you say, yeah, sure, because there's no metric impact, let's just shelf the idea, right? But in reality, what might be happening is certain segment of your population or your users might be really convert using your experiment much better than other audiences. But because the size of the audience is much so low, you would probably miss on that. So let's say your super users really love a feature that you just built, right? But because this percentage of super users so low, you will not be able to figure out if those are a target audience, those are the kind of users who reacted really well, right? So what is the better approach is just having a kind of starting the inverted way. For the experiment, if you think that this product change might matter more to a certain kind of audience, right? Whatever it is, let's say you're doing let's say a voice search option in your product, right? Um, just from a very high level, it may matter more to people who are who prefer non-English as the primary medium of using apps, right? So because they have to type less and so on and so forth. So you might prefer, okay, instead of launching to everyone, let's first launch to users who kind of come from those areas, and then slowly expand the scope, right? So that's the broader idea I'm getting at. So goal to here is or identify target audience to a more as applicable. Now here's the buckets, simple buckets that I think they really work really well, which is you go from the extreme right, sorry, you go from people who show very positive impact to people who could show some positive impact, and then so on. People who might not show any impact at all, negative impact, and very negative. Okay. So thinking is use your intuition, talk to internal stakeholder, conduct user interviews, traditional user research interviews to figure out, okay, for this product what I'm thinking of, um, I think these certain kind of people would fit in this kind of bucket, right? People who have used this for 2 years, they might fall into the green bucket, and people who've just come in, they might fall in the gray bucket. So you'll make very informed choices in terms of who to roll out to, right? That's the basic idea. Just one more thing, make sure to also take notes of the expected behavior. So let's say for the green bucket, as we just said, people who've been using the product for at least 2 years are expected to show the most positive impact. Please also make a note on, okay, this is the kind of metric impact we get impact we expecting that this metric for these users would increase by 5 to 10%, or this retention metric should improve by so and so percent. So that's that about on the user segmentation front. Um, Among the second last step here is determining the sample size. Sorry, I think someone muted me. Okay, I hope you guys can hear me now. Okay, awesome. Harshit, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Awesome, awesome. I'll start again. Cool. Sorry about that, guys. It's issues with the open presentation. Okay, awesome. So coming to this step, which is one of now this is, I would say, the last technical step. It's like once you've understood this experiment I want to run. This is the kind of audience. This is the metrics. We're sure on everything. Now it's about actually defining the specific experiment. So three things here. One is the sample size, runtime, and audience allocation. This is the top three things that people need to specify. Now here's a simple thing, right? Generally, from a layman point of view, the larger sample size, the more accurate the results, right? If you can roll out an experiment to, all of your users, let's say 10 million of all of your 10 million users, sure, that's the best. You get, from a layman point of view, that should give you the best accuracy in your measurement. But the fact of the matter is, from a statistical point of view, it's actually possible to calculate an optimal sample size, right? So it's possible that for a certain experiment that you're doing, instead of 10 million, you would get to the right experimental impact with just say 100,000 users, right? Again, it's a function of where in the product the feature is, how many people are generally using that kind of feature, what is the conversion impact that you're expecting, and we'll just talk about. But that's the reality. So the goal is, so ultimately the goal is, in any case, is to get the experiment results with the high statistical significance, right? And the statistical significance, for people who are not aware of the term, is basically a statistical terminology which determines how reliable are your results. So if you're seeing that, okay, my experiment created a 10% increment in user conversion, and that statistical significance is at 60%, that means that there's a 40% probability that that impact is not right? 10% by the seeing that actually might be just 1%, or it could, in worst case, maybe minus 1%. So generally, any experimentation you do across any platform, any tool, just final rule is make sure your statistical significance is at least 95% before you conclude the experiment. Okay. So now coming back to the optimal sample size that we just talked about. Now it's a complicated equation, statistical equation. But what I prefer is, instead of worrying about that equation, there's this calculators on a bunch of websites. Like Optimizely has one of the needles that I've seen, where you basically punch in a bunch of parameters and it tells you the number of users that you need for the experiment to hit at least 95% statistical significance, right? Again, like I said, this is for people who want to optimize the size of rollout, right? If you are happy to roll out to have all the users, sure, that's totally your call, right? Now, the way it works is there are two simple parameters that this system takes in. Again, like I said, this is a commonly known formula. Optimizely is just one of the examples you can find across any other platform. Even Optimize has a calculator within them. So what it takes in the baseline conversion rate. Baseline conversion rate is what is the current conversion rate that you see in general, right? For whatever feature ID that you're trying, right? And then the second input it takes is the minimum detectable effect, right? So let's say my baseline conversion rate is, let's say for the basket page, right, where people start their checkout process, is 15%. So I'll punch in 15 in the first, parameter. The second one, let's say I'm looking at detecting any small change, like it's a very high value feature, like even 0.1% shift here will mean $1,000, $100,000 more of revenue. So I want to detect that. But if it's a very, let's say, homepage feature where it's okay, I mean, the conversion rate from homepage traffic is much lesser, so I'm happy with the, much less, I would say, detectable range. So if I want to detect any small changes, I'll go with, let's say, 0.1% here in the second parameter. But if I'm okay with having a wider wider range of accuracy, then I'll increase the number. And as you'll change this number, the sample sizes would change. So what you'll see is, as your minimum detectable effect, as it reduces, the sample size increase, because the experiment needs more users to get more confidence on the change in the metric. Similarly, as you increase the baseline conversion rate, as you decrease the baseline conversion rate, you'll see the sample size increase as well, right? So that's the approach around how do you figure out the right sample size. Now, I saw a question on removing bias. Now, I think the simple how to remove bias in A/B experiment, I think the answer is very simple. Is number one, whatever tool you use, you build it in-house or you integrate an external tool, it will most probably have a statistically random rollout, right? So there's an engine, there's a huge algorithm, there's a massive proprietary algorithm every player has, which makes sure that they don't have any bias in rolling out. So they don't accidentally roll out to more users in Delhi compared to Bangalore, or more users on Android versus iOS. They make sure that it's absolutely random across globally. That is one. That is how you primarily remove bias. But the final, I think, check that you can still do is, before concluding any experiment, right? Maybe for any kind of audience or any kind of city or whatever, locate, expand your role to all users, right? Just to double check that there's no very strong variation. Because if there's, for some reason, if there's some bias, that will get clarified when you expand to all users, because then essentially there's no reason for bias to be there, because it's all blended out. So that's one. Now, coming to the runtime, which is, I think, one of the key questions as well, which is, the approach is very simple. Once you determine the optimal sample size, like as I discussed, there's 100K users is what you need for your particular experiment. Runtime is basically calculated by the number of users who would be seeing that experiment. Simple as that. So here the equation is total sample size 100K, and the denominator, what we have is average number of daily users coming to that feature, crossed by personal use include excess, because you would not obviously roll the experiment to all the users, right? Let's say the experiment roll out to just 40% of all user base that you have, and out of 40 you have rolled out to 40%. So which means that if you're having 200k daily users, only 40% of those would be included in this experiment. So you'll cross 400k with 0.04, and then you'll get the denominator here. So this will tell you the number of days ideally you should be running your experiment for, right? And there's a bunch of blogs link I put in here that you can drill into to understand more statistical and other details around the whole idea of sample size and runtime. Here's a tool, by the way, I found for VWO, which is pretty slick in terms of figuring out the final runtime. So the tool that we discussed before helps you with only the sample size, but generally I think most of you would be concerned more about answering this, which is how many days should I keep it on to manage my calendar. So you could also instead use this, where it does both things. It figures out the total number of optimal number of users for your experiment, as well as the optimal duration that you should run it for by combining the first and the second equation in one single form. Here's a hyperlink, you can check it out later. Here's a slightly low math approach that I personally do. This for I would say advanced users or people who are slightly more averse with statistical significance. So as I said before, the whole idea is getting to a 95 statistical significance more than 95%, right? So the approach that I tend to take generally and I recommend is if you don't want to go through the entire thing we discussed before, these equations and these calculations, what you can do is for any experiment, start with 10 days as a default rollout period. And start with a 10% rollout. 10% as in out of all the users, you enable the experiment only for 10% of the users, right? Which is a pretty decent rollout. It's not too huge, it's not too small. And then what you do is keep monitoring the statistical significance of experiment results. So essentially, statistical significance is a variable that you will be able to monitor on a daily basis. For example, here I monitor, and this is a snapshot of Optimize, for every goal metric for every experiment, we can see the statistical significance changing by the day. So as you can see, this is experiment number 1. The significance started at somewhere around 60%, and then it hovered and went up, but it's still below 95%. As you can see, the highest it was 94.6, right? And then it dropped again. What it means is I have to still wait a little more or even expand rollout, right? So I'll monitor till it goes beyond 95%, right? Now, another experiment I will see right from the rollout, because the experiment was so obvious, so it makes so much sense. Started the significance on 99.99% right from day 1, right? So technically speaking, I can stop the experiment right now and conclude my results, right? Because I don't need to show to more users, because statistics is already beyond 95% for 3 consecutive days. Sorry, I missed to mention that. So key condition is check that your graph is above 95% for 3 to 5 consecutive days, because it's always, there can be some aberrations because of some changes in user behavior, whatever, seasonal shifts across the week, weekend, weekday, all this kind of stuff. So if you are at 95 for at least 3 to 5 days and for at least 20k users, right, just to I think it's generally okay to conclude the experiment. But if you don't hit that, you can always just increase the rollout here or increase your duration, and then you can monitor them. So this is a slightly easier approach. Finally, here a small bit that I think every A/B experiment person needs to know about, which is audience allocation. Generally, and this is something we kind of debated a lot and finally come to a conclusion, is you have to decide for any experiment that what would be the percentage split between the original is the control group, people who are not seeing the experimental change, and variant are people who are seeing the experimental. You have to decide what is the ratio between them, right? So out of 100 people who are part of the experiment, will we have equal people in all, or will we have, okay, there's just 20% in the original and 80% the rest, right? So generally what I recommend is going with a 50-50% split. So this is a slightly complex, this is a multivariate example. As you can see, the first example is a 50-50 split. So all the variants are at the same exact distribution, right? The second variant you will see, this is an uneven allocation. This is, as you can see, the control group as a 16%, the rest is at 2 to 2%, right? This is an example of uneven allocation. Now, I do not recommend this, because it makes it tougher for you to kind of trust the results as well, experimental results. Plus it only makes sense for you to do when you're testing, let's say, a very high risk idea where you want very, very low few people to see the experimental feature. So keep an eye on this whenever you're setting any using any tool for that matter. Just make sure, try to go with 50-50 rollout. But very exceptional circumstances, yes, you can go with a non-equal rollout, like this, for example. Right. Final thing here is creating a post-rollout plan of action. I think this is the one thing that people don't like to do, because it takes effort and does not help with you right now. But this is the one thing I think which will help you a lot, even during the stakeholder buy-in, because any stakeholder that you talk to pitching the experiment, they will want to know, okay, three things. If it works, what will we do next? If it doesn't work, what will we do next? If it does not work at all, if there's no impact, what will we do next, right? And if it works, and you publish your results on the group company email, the first question would be, okay, great, congratulations, now what is the next step, right? So it's better to always have some broad answers to this early on, before you can even commission the experiment. So I've just put this broad bucket. So again, this is a tentative, you can fill it up yourself, but the broad idea is just make sure to get a handle on all these three aspects. What will you do when there's negative impact? What will you do when there's no impact? What will you do when happens this? Because there might be things that you plan to do after the experience success. You plan to do something else, launch the feature globally, but there might be some stakeholder unhappy with this, and you'll have to triage that and figure out a approach to convince them. Awesome. So that's about that, and yeah, that's it. I think then you're all set to launch the A/B test based on the specifics, and monitor the results and take the next call based. Now, final couple of slides.
Hey, Nimit, Harshad here. I think as we're progressing, right, I just thought to pause you for a couple of relevant questions. Is that okay?
No, absolutely.
We're just going in the flow, right? So one of the questions, because the last section that we saw, a question that has come in from Vivek is the sample size selection for A/B test. Would it depend on the target audience size? The reason being, his app targets primarily all medical stores. So is sample size relative, or how to go about it?
Sample size relative to your context, is business context. Is that what you mean? Or?
Yeah, so I think also the size of the audience in those terms, maybe apart from the context, I think the size of the total audience that you would have.
Right. Okay, awesome. Whatever. Awesome. So great question, Vivek. Right. So I think so here's an example. Let's think of Facebook. Right. They have 1 billion users. Right.
Sure.
Your product has, let's say, even BigBasket has much lower user base, right? But when it comes to defining the sample size of an A/B test, right? Let me just go back to the slide for perspective. Let me just hide this as well. So it is independent of that. It is independent of the total size of your population. So when Facebook, for example, decides to run an experiment, they basically run thousands of experiments, right, parallelly, and those experiments are for probably each experiment is a very small user base, right? Now, when you run an experiment, you will probably run based on your user base. But in both the cases, Facebook or you, the only criteria to define how many users you should have in the sample space is based on this kind of this statistical equation, right? It's completely independent of your total user base, right? So if you're a startup who has, let's say, 1 million users, right? That's it. But your optimal sample size based on these calculations here is let's say 50K, right? It might be the same number for Facebook as well for an experiment that they are trying, right? And both of you guys should launch experiment for this kind of audience, 50K. That's it, right? So it's completely immaterial of your overall audience size. It just takes care of, it just matters on your conversion rate, your baseline conversion, your detectable difference, and the number of people who are actually using that feature currently, right? So you don't have to worry about your overall user base that way, if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think yes. So Vivek has sent his regards to you. So thanks, Nimit. That helps.
Awesome.
Awesome. So yeah, I think please go ahead. We'll take up next questions again after the section.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. Great. Very good thing here. So one is just analyzing experiment results, right? Again, the snapshot optimized, but yes, this is kind of the same thing you'll see across any system that you use. Only look at, like I said, 95 metrics which have achieved at least 95% statistical significance, right? Here's, for example, a small infographic in them. So what happens is for every metric, they color coded based on statistical significance. So for me, for example, if I see that the metric is light green colored, I know that it's not, I cannot conclude the impact of metric yet. But the moment I see this, this bluish or dark green, the first metric, and I know that, yeah, I can start drawing conclusions from that. Similarly, for the negative impact, if the negative impact is at least 95% significant, they show this dark red color, otherwise an orange color. So just a small note there, always keep an eye, bottom line, always keep an eye on the statistical significance before drawing the conclusions or coding the results further. Second step here is to always make sure to go back to the original expectations. So go back to your notes. Hey, this is the goal metric that I specified, and this was the impact I was expecting, and this is what I actually saw. The reason I say this will help you kind of get a better sense of how your audience reacts to your ideas and different what for example, which part of the funnel reacts better in terms of ideas in general, right? You'll get a better sense of that. So next time onwards, when you think of ideas, you'll have a better sense. Okay, if we experiment with our homepage, you really need to do a very, very impactful experiment to get, let's say, even a 1% uplift in conversion. But if you do even a small, a shortcut, a small improvement in the payment page, then you have a 10% improvement. So that will help you in kind of, I would say, prioritizing ideas on the go. Going forward. Third thing is try doing a sanity check across the organization. Hey, you were looking at goal metrics, but what if, hypothetically speaking, other metric which you're not even thinking of got impacted because of your work? So just do a final sanity check, and then I think you should be good to go. Once you've got through all 3 steps, you should be good to go to code the results going forward. A couple of last advanced topics here is managing parallel A/B tests. So one, like we discussed about allocation, or we talked about this one, the 95% significance. The other thing is we have to be careful about keeping the experiment exclusive. What I mean exclusive is exclusive experiments means that all the audience which is in that experiment, let's say in the control experiment group, they would not be available for any other experiment, right? They would be completely reserved for the experiment. So if you're running experiment 1 and then you run experiment number 2, and the people who participate in experiment number 2 would not be would be completely new. They would not be people who are already part of this. But if you do not have an exclusive experiment running, then you could have people across, same person could be available across these 2 experiments, right? Now this is not recommended because you don't know how, let's say, because this person who's in the middle here, you will be seeing both the product changes, and that will make it very difficult for you to gauge the metric impact, right? Because you would know conversion impacted for this particular guy in the center because of this idea or this idea. Generally, I recommend just keeping experiment exclusive. And last thing is be careful about this allocation. 100% is your total audience. Then when you're running parallel experiment, you have to be careful about how much audience you use for an experiment. So if you want to run 5 experiments parallelly, make sure to calculate your audience size, everything accordingly. So 5, let's say you want to split it into 5 pieces, which is 20% each, then make sure that 20% of your user base, like Vivek just pointed out, for your user base, you have to make sure that, okay, 20% audience means generally so many users. Will that be enough for my experiment? So all this calculation will be done early on for you to be able to plan roll of the experiment, successfully down the line. And lastly, just be aware of all the experiments running across the organization. So you don't want to be in a situation where you're running experiments and some other product manager or business you're running another experiment and there's a pollution between the results, or he forgot to mark his experiment as exclusive, and then both of your results are getting muddled up. So that's one thing. Here's also but the warning, for example, Optimize shows, hey, if you do exclusive, if you do non-exclusive, it's really not recommended because it just muddies up the results. Cool. Coming to the one of the last couple of slides, choosing the right A/B tester tool. I think this is one of the most important topics when you're convinced about A/B testing and ready to go forward. Now, here's the thing. I think, in my opinion, you can, if you build your own system, because it's a simple random rollout system, right? You can do something as simple as users whose user ID is ending with, let's say, even number is part of cohort A control group, and people are part of whose last digit is odd, they're part of the test group, right? And this will make sure that you have a 50-50 clean 50-50 rollout, which is unbiased, and it works beautifully, right? And it's easy. You can if your server team can easily set it up, right? Because you have all the data in the simple logic. Only catch is you might not be able to easily run multiple parallel tests. You might not be able to run statistical significance checks easily. You'll have to run a query by yourself, all the time. You won't have dashboards, all the stuff. Multivariate will also be difficult, but again, that depends on your use case. If you're just in my thinking, if you're a startup and you're just starting off and you have a tight budget, start with maybe a simple in-house system. Once you prove the value to the executives and you're sure to go forward, then you can research. Now, these are two tools which are out there in market that I kind of notice in great detail: Optimize and Firebase. And now you can, but please go do your research. You'll find a bunch of tools, and you can kind of integrate them. And as long as, in my thinking, as long as your fundamentals are correct about what A/B testing includes, like we talked about exclusive experiment, about allocation, we talked about statistics. If you're clear on all these basic concepts, I think regardless of whatever tool you use, I think you would be fine. You would be able to churn out what you want. Last couple of things for people, which was also happening. The question that I got is, how do you get started? How do you get your organization behind A/B testing? Right now, I think the simple workflow is start simple, right? First, try some ideas, try some small A/B tests, right? It might not be a big feature. It could be a simple name feature, changing the name of a feature, not workflow change, but the name of a feature, or changing the positioning of certain elements, and just showing small just low hanging fruits. When you show the impact, then your CXOs most probably would be interested in those, because you will prove that, hey, by using this approach, you were able to scientifically prove the impact of these ideas, and you were able to do it without any risk, without impacting the entire user base. So I think it's just a win-win situation for the CXOs. Once you get their buy-in, just create an easy way for people to submit their ideas, because once you demonstrate your success, hey, I tried these 5 small ideas and I got like 0.01 improvement in the metric across all these different ideas, then people will be excited to help you with more ideas. Then make sure you create maybe a forum or Google form or something to get eyes rolling in. And then your job is to train people in designing the A/B tests like you do, and then you kind of end up operating as a gatekeeper in helping them, spec it properly, and then launch it and manage them properly in the calendar. Here's a link to a post by Pinterest on how they develop this entire. They call it the experiment idea review process, where they expand the experimental growth across the entire organization instead of just having 3-4 people design experiments. So I highly recommend checking this out when you have time. I think this is the fun slides here. How to make A/B testing integral part of PM workflow. I think very simple things that we did is worked out is in your RFP document or product spec. Just I think a simple intervention you do is add a field called something like needs experimentation. I would recommend not putting A/B testing, because then again it might people would think of, okay, this is just about testing a UI element, the standard myth. But go with something like this, and then on selecting this, you would basically all the requests will be filtered out to you or the organization in terms of which you need to be part of the A/B experimental workflow easily. And then define standard timeline buffers. So you can say for any product spec, any product request which needs experimentation, we have to automatically add, let's say, 1 sprint for running an experiment, right? So it would be a very clear call out, and it would reduce any kind of friction or gap in communication with the product program managers or the CXOs. Everyone will know, if this is yes, then it means this, right? Lastly, just add one more section called experiment observation, something like experiment observations to your spec. If your experimentation is yes, and then make sure to go back to it. So this will make sure that the entire stakeholders, loop who's engaging with you, they know that, okay, this is an experiment and we should expect observations. And once observation is there, then we'll decide what to do next about the experiment. So I think these small things should help you if not completely, it should help you get started in integrating A/B testing in your product management workflow. Last couple of bonus slides. Just I'm sure you guys are pretty tired because I went way over the timeline, but I'll just wrap up very quickly here. Couple of small things. Just make sure once you've gotten a handle on the A/B testing workflow and you're ready to go design your roadmap around that, commit more to it. Make sure to first figure out the key metric, the driving metric for your entire experimental workflow. For example, what I mean is a North Star metric, which you might have heard of. But define that and make sure for every experiment that you do, in the end, you're always by default tracking the impact on that. For LinkedIn, their metric was quality sign up. So whatever they did, even if was not straight about directly about sign up page impact, they used to always check the impact on quality sign up, right? And you can check more on the blog. But bottom line is, don't just randomly throw ideas. Just make sure that all the ideas are centralized based on a single metric. So if an idea is performing well on your KPIs but is working bad on this common metric, then it means that it's not good for the overall trajectory of the product. So quarter end review. So basically quarter end review of the product and experimentation should be based on the net impact on this one single metric that you figure out, right? So make sure that all your ideas are around that. Second part is when it comes to finding experiment ideas, one of the interesting things that I've figured out here is this approach, this kind of tree approach, where what this Brian Balfour is a very popular leader from the product manager space, product consultancy space. What it does is he breaks down the metric in to small bits. For example, this is the final metric, which is time spent on music. For Spotify, his example was listening to music. Then if you work backwards, you'll see that okay, it breaks down to this, then further back like this. So what it helps you is it helps you determine, okay, it means that for it I have to find ideas for this new artist notifications, for example, it will ultimately impact this in this way. So this will give you a clear kind of a skeleton to creatively think of ideas on. So that's one approach that I would recommend. Final slide here is top mistakes to avoid while A/B testing. Just make sure you understand the cascading impact of product change. I'm sure you're experienced product leaders on this call. You know the meaning of ecosystem impact. So if you make a small change here, it has the potential to change things across the organized product, and so be careful about that fact. Don't just measure the impact on that product change and leave it. Just make sure to check that there's no cascading impact that might hit you down the line. Second one here is running too many experiments with too many touch points. So this is the risk here is with experiments, too many metrics, too many touch points, it just becomes very difficult, one, to kind of instrument it properly, and second, to draw inferences, because one is that if you have 15, 16 metrics, for a single experiment, and let's say 5 out of them are great and the rest of ones are not showing a weird move or not working out, you might be confused about what is the next step. Instead, what I would recommend is simplify your experiment. Start with a very small idea, very small focus, prove the metric there, and then start adding the bells and whistles, going forward. Like I showed the example where we revamped the that address form from one design to another design, and then we got a better impact. Similarly, start with a simple experiment. If it works, then add one more layer, so on, add to touch points, and then slowly get to the final one. Third one is very obvious: not being aware of organization-wide experiments. So if you don't know, if you're not aware of that, then some other experiment, which may not be an experiment, might be a simple rollout, feature rollout, right? It might impact your experiment in a negative way, right? So if someone launches a new feature using feature flags for all users in USA, and your experiment has people from USA and Singapore, random spread, you might not be able to figure out why people in USA, some cohort of your audience, A/B experiment is performing way better or way differently, right? So be aware of that. Lastly, a very obvious one, make sure to keep the focus on the dollar impact, right? So this is a mistake you might do repeatedly, and I've been doing repeatedly, but now I've understood it really well, which is boil down what the impact of your work in terms of the dollars. I'm just senior product leaders here understand this fact, but just calling it out again, for myself as well, which is make sure to quantify the impact that experiment has created, right? Which will make it easier for you to, one, talk about to your business leaders, and second, it will also help you prioritize the right ideas, right? So 10% impact on a certain metric, if it gives you, let's say, $1,000 worth of revenue or retention, versus another idea which has 0.1% improvement in conversion per metric, but the impact is 100K per month, then you'll get in perspective. Yeah, it means that pursuing those other kind of ideas is slightly more valuable for the business than the first idea. So percentage is not the final call. The final call is the final impact on the business. That's the one thing I wanted to call out, and that's it. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for your time and your patience, especially. I can see that I overshot the time by quite a lot, but I hope you got something valuable out of it. So cool. Harshit, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Nimit. I think definitely very interesting stuff, and I think we've got a lot to learn. I think we've already covered this, but I think we've got a question that how long after design and implementation will it take before we can get the results of an A/B test? Of course, I think you did cover it, but if you would want to add some points on top of that, feel free to add.
No, I think this. I mean, we can just read the same point. You have to wait for 95% statistical significance. If you get to that, you can conclude. But again, one point I would add is there's certain experiments which may never get to 95% accurate significance, right? Because the experiment is so vague. Let's say the idea is so vague, so that okay, I'll little down on this statistical significance. Statistical significance ideas determine that are significantly more people are reacting in this way, the way metric is trying to go. But if, let's say, out of 10 people who seeing the product change, five of them are reacting positively and 5 of them are reacting negatively, right? 50-50.
Right.
Then the system would be confused. It won't know whether it is positive or negative, right? In that case, your statistical significance will hover around, let's say, 50%.
Sure.
So in that case, you should drop the experiment. So if you don't see that curve, let me just go back very quickly.
Sure.
1 second. So yeah. So let's say it's quite possible that your curve here never achieves 95%. It's hovers around 50% or 75% for 2 weeks, for example, right? If that happens, and if you've tried expanding the rollout and everything, then it means that this idea is probably not worthwhile to pursue, right? And you should conclude it in this way. You should call it basically this one. Conclusive. So I should add that. So if the statistical significance never achieves 95%, then you should call it inconclusive and think of a different way to launch the idea again.
Got it. Makes sense. I think that pretty much helps. One more thing, I think, again, just adding to the sample size thing that we earlier discussed, I think there was a follow-up question on that by Ajinkya. So what he says or wants to understand is, with so many users per variant, do I need to generate so much traffic to do A/B testing, or what would your suggestion be for something which is a low traffic or a high ticket site app or something like that?
Right. So Ajinkya, so yeah, let me just go back to the slide for perspective. Sure. So yes, that's exactly what we are trying to solve here with this approach. Is if let's say let's take the Facebook example, okay? If I was Facebook, I can just say any experiment, just roll it out to 0.1%, because I know 0.1% is going to be millions of users, so not millions, at least 5 users, right? I don't have to worry about that, right?
Right.
But if you're a small startup who has less than, let's say, 10 million users or so, then you would have to be mindful, because if you don't do that, then you would not be able to run parallel experiments, right? Or you cannot even justify one single experiment. So the idea is that based on this equation that you see here, you determine the most optimal number of users, right? Now, based on see, one thing you have to keep in mind is that okay, let me actually use this example. So let's say your for your product, right? You will have a certain kind of daily users, which might be much lesser than Facebook, right? Comparatively, and then these metrics, the first 3 metrics that you see, right? These are pure experiment, nothing to do with your product, okay? So for a Facebook product manager versus you, these would be the exactly same, correct? The first 3 metrics. Now, the only thing which differs is this one, the average daily visitors, correct? Now, this is again your subjective metric, which is nothing to do with your business size, your audience size, right? So, only based on this does your rollout gets decided, right? So, but again, it's highly subjective. If your experiment is such that your sample size needed is very small, then you will be fine. You don't have to have a massive rollout. But okay, let's take an example: homepage experiment versus a checkout page experiment. Okay,
Sure.
now it's possible that your traffic for your kind of traffic, any homepage experiment might not achieve statistical significance, right? Because the conversion is low. Because I will see this equation, the conversion will be low, right? People are coming to the homepage, their net conversion is low, right? And you would want to detect lately there's a 10%. So the net number of sorry, let's use this. The net number will be very huge, right? But if you do a checkout page, let's say payment page experiment, your conversion rate would be very high. Conversion rate here would be, let's say, in the 80s, right? Because again, conversion here is, be careful. Conversion here means people coming to that step and moving forward, right? It is not about the business conversion. It does not mean order placement. It just means conversion rate, right? So, so on the checkout page, the conversion was likely to be at 80%. Payment page checkout. Here, even if you put minimum detector 2%, chances are that you would see a very small sample size. It might be relatively. In the homepage experiment, you might see 100K users. For the payment page, you might see the optimal size, let's say, 50K users. Sorry, 10K users, right? It's a very subjective call, but the bottom line is you don't have to. It's like let me change tracks here. It's like machine learning, right? Machine learning, the biggest myth is you need a lot of data. You need to be Google or you need to be Facebook to be able to build any machine learning product, right? But the fact of the matter is, the size of the data does not matter. What matters is the quality of data and the right kind of data, right? Optimal, rather, actually the optimal data. The same mental model here. You need to have the optimal set of users to crack to do this, right? And just blindly saying that, oh, I need a ton of users to run A/B testing, that's absolutely wrong. That is what I'm trying to kind of justify here. So yes, please, this experimentation is not just for the big folks. It's it's a pure math problem. Basically, it's a science problem. The way I would finally quote it out. Think of it as a science problem. It's not a regular business problem. It's a science problem. So if science says that optimal is this, then that's it. You don't have to worry about other perceptions. Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I'm hoping that this really answers. One more aspect which has, I think, come in terms of audience wanting to understand that okay, we've arrived to start an A/B. Before that, as you said, that we will try to validate or try to think of some product idea, right? Now that of course arises from multiple sources, that you see problems maybe from your support by thing, right? How do we go even one step back, that when you want to define or when you want to actually start designing an experiment, the aspect or the angle of talking to your users, and if you actually do that before, what are things would you want to introspect from the users based on which you might want to design your experiment or make changes or kind of those things?
Okay. Is it about identify the target audience as well, or understanding the right design of the experiment? Like,
so I think we also had a questions about identifying the right TG as well. Yes, okay. You are correct. Both the aspects.
Got it. That's a very, very important question, slightly broad as well. What I would say is it's a very subjective one. Based on this, that depends on the experiment that you're looking at. If I was to put a goal, like a very broad goal to whatever approach to take, it is that with users, your goal is to understand, number one, is this the right kind of user who would react to this experiment, this new change rather, right? So for example, certain power users might react to some features which are different, and first time early users might react to other kind of features, right? So first thing is to watch that, right? Very simple. Who will react better or react negatively as well, right? Because as you know, things like the full design change, right? Reddit did a redesign recently, not recently, bunch of years back, and they knew that they did a A/B experiment, and they knew that the old people, their seasoned users, they would be really up in arms, right? And they kind of put those users in the dark red bucket, I guess, here, right? But they knew that, okay, we have to sustain this because it's a business call. We have to move to the next one. So they knew that, okay, the new users will come in, they would react positively. Their metrics would be, engagement metrics would be much better. So they probably put them in the green bucket here, okay? And for the old users, senior and super users who already got their workflow set up, they probably put them in the red bucket after talking to them, understanding your sentiments, and they had an active thread going on to discuss the redesign. And this is how in my guess, they would have bucketed people, and then would have taken a call that okay, we'll give these people 6 months, because there's always going to be backlash. Let's them 6 months, and then let's see if they move towards the green bucket, right? So that's one. Second thing is, I think it's this is a simple product, research problem that you have to figure out if you're designing the most optimal thing, right? I mean, there's nothing. A/B experiment does not like change that picture. It's a product idea. You have to research with your audience, user intuition, do a traditional user research where user interviews rather research interviews where you're listening, try to understand if this makes sense, show them a prototype. So I don't think anything changes there really. Only thing which changes kind of from the experimentation point of view is there's extra layer of, hey, who should see this first, rather, I should say, right? Who are the people who react most? So in the first rollout, we should specifically target these people so that we get a benchmark. Okay, for 20% of our audience, who are this style, let's say English-speaking audience, hypothetically speaking, they are showing 10% improvement in their D90 retention because of this product change. And the rest of the audience is showing just a 5% improvement in D90 retention. So getting to that understanding, right? Instead of a blind rollout. I think that's the only change that this brings in. But apart from that, the product workflow remains the same. There's no kind of change there, in my thinking. In terms of figuring out if you're building the right experiment. So essentially, you have to validate, forget the first part, you have to validate if this is the thing that you're thinking of is the best answer to kind of do the job that a user is trying to do. That's a traditional product management problem. I think,
True.
there's nothing fancy there. Yeah.
Interesting. So I think we're gonna bother you for one more question. So one thing which has come in is, what are the technical prerequisites for A/B testing? The person was trying to do some A/B tests for the app, but then he realized that he cannot do much variations because he will have to connect the app elements with remote config to run the A/B test from the Firebase. What is something that he can do in this case?
Okay, Firebase. That is why I don't really like Firebase because
I think if you already covered, that is also a question that what is your preferred tools or what is the stack you folks use at BigBasket?
I'll thank you for asking that question. But again, I should state that I'm not paid by Optimize to do this. So here's the thing. So Firebase, yes, you're right. What is question? Firebase has this issue about you have to integrate everything on their panel, right? Every element, whichever you want to experiment with, has to be like Google Analytics, right? To track a metric of Google Analytics or Firebase Analytics, you have to kind of hook it up into Firebase code, right? Now that is a challenge, and I personally find that approach to be slightly not so clean because it messes up your code and it's just not right. What I would rather prefer, the reason I prefer Optimize over Firebase quickly, is that Optimize lets you go the code block approach, right? What I mean by that is, let's say you're trying to, this is a feature, right? Let's say, imagine this is a code base for your onboarding feature, right? You're trying to try a different version of it, different idea, which is this code base, okay? This is the current code base, this is a new code base for the new experience, okay? What Optimize like to do it, they just gives you a, let's say a bracket, like code block bracket, blind. And what they say, will tell you is for a certain experiment, whatever you paste in this curly brackets, right, this code block, we'll execute it when we decide that this particular customer, this particular user is a control group, okay? But if we decide randomly that, let's say this particular user is for the experimental group, we'll show them the other code block. Now they don't care about what is in that code block. It could be anything. It could be just a button color change. It could be a new algorithm. It could be a new API that you're hooked up to, whatever you want to do. If they just give you the space, you can insert whatever code you want to do, right? Now that is so much more easy because you don't have to hook all the piece of that code to Firebase. Like in Firebase's case, I don't think that's even possible. They want every UI element to be hooked up to the Firebase system. I don't know if they've evolved, to be honest, over the years. But last when I checked, they had this problem. I would say you look for. I mean, I shouldn't say just go with Optimize. I should look for A/B experiment tools, which let you use a code block approach. If you do that, basically you don't have to do any hooking. All you do is the only thing that you're getting extra added to your app is those curly brackets, a small piece of code which gets generated for every experiment, and you have to just paste it in a code. Once you're done with the experiment, just comment it out or delete it. That's the only thing. That is why I really like that. Any developer I work with is able to grasp like that, because there's no rocket science to it. It's just a code block.
Right. Yeah. I think then also having that also solves for the learning curve, because eventually you would end up working with different teams internally. Maybe, of course, I think a lot of companies do have structures where they would have a separate growth pod. In that case, anyways, everyone is on the same page. That helps. But then, working with different teams internally, or probably, when you switch products, that challenge comes. So I think this is really good, because then someone has to really doesn't get on the learning curve. And I think the end objective is to quickly conduct an experiment that gets through.
Exactly.
So I think that makes, go on.
Like further to your point, Harshit, the tool is a means to an end. Right, so I always believe in just keeping it as simple as possible. But if you go to the market, you'll see Optimizely is also an A/B experiment. They've come up with the A/B experiment system, and there's an Indian player as well, Hansel, that I've heard of. Now, those are great tools, right? There are a lot of features. They have this dynamic flow charts and all, where you can drive the user different workflow, blah blah blah. But the bottom line is, what I felt from, again, my perspective, my personal perspective, not the organization perspective, is that it kind of digresses you from the core work. Your core work is to think of experiments, right? The tool is to just do a random rollout and help you track the metrics as statistical significance, right? Anything else is a distraction. That is it. So whatever choice you make, depends on your comfort zone, right? My recommendation would be do something which is mindless, like you just said. It's mindless. You just do it easily. The more bells and whistles you have in the platform, the less usable it is, the less slick it is in the long run. So Optimize, to be honest, they do not have a lot of extra features that I would get in other platforms, but they just work, as simple. So it depends totally on your style, but that would be my broad recommendation, because there's so many moving pieces. If you're running an experiment, it's like an insane job getting it. See, launching a product is easy. It's a whole different ballgame. So it's like I would say 10x different battle.
Absolutely. No, I think that pretty much sums up, as well as I think would really appreciate the point that when you also shared that when there are a lot of experiments going on internally, how you should ensure that your experiment or your results are not getting impacted, because a lot of times when we talk with product teams, right, in our day-to-day job, it does come in, right? And because now we are seeing an increasing culture of growth and A/B tests coming in the Indian ecosystem as well. So I think multiple teams do that. But yeah, I think that point was really appreciated, where how to get a clarity on this and ensure that your experiment are not results are really not polluted. Because a lot of time happens that you end up doing something, but what you wanted to conclude, something else really disturbs those numbers, and then you are not able to really ensure that that's the right result or not.
Totally. That has to be really. It's a valuable technique, guys. It's an extremely valuable approach. But again, this comes with a lot of I should say nitty-gritties that you should be careful about, or not end up getting the benefit that you think you would want to get. So that is my small bit here.
Absolutely. I think this has been great, Nimit. I think we've been able to answer a lot of questions here. What we could do is, as a parting note, if there is something if you want to add. Apart from that, just for everyone's consumption, we will be going ahead and putting this up, the recording of the session, on Truecaller's YouTube channel. We will get back to you with a thank you email, which will feature the link to the recording. So stay assured on that. And in case, anyways, if you want to connect with Nimit has shared his coordinates. We'll also try to put it on those email. So feel free to bother Nimit with all your more questions. And absolutely. I'm pretty sure he'll be more than happy to help you out.
Right. So yeah, feel free to reach me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I'm pretty active there, and yeah, more than happy to talk to you, help you with, and you can also trend me if there's you inside here you have found. I would, it would be great that I could get to know about it and include in my workflow. So yeah, that would
Right,
be
right.
awesome.
Absolutely. Great. So I think let's call it evening. Thanks again, Nimit, for joining us, and looking forward to bringing more such sessions to the community with you. Uh, and yeah, thank you, folks, for joining in. Great to have you all. And yeah, looking forward to have you guys in our upcoming sessions as well. Do keep track of it. We will get back to you soon on the upcoming stuff. Great. Thanks all. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks everyone joining in, and thanks for sticking around. I think I went like double the time, I guess.
No way, that's it, right? I think everyone was hooked, and I think this is something that people are really looking forward to understand. So and learn. So yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Perfect. Cool. Awesome. Thanks
Great.
everyone joining.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye bye.